The war finally ended after years of fire, smoke, and endless fear, and the human soldier Daniel stood in the middle of the silent battlefield, his armor damaged, his face tired, and his eyes searching for something he could not explain. For months he had dreamed of this moment, the moment when everything would stop, when the noise of explosions would disappear, and when he would finally receive the reward he believed he had earned. Money, respect, maybe even a chance to return home and live a normal life. But something felt strange. The silence was too deep, too heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The camp was slowly coming back to life. Soldiers were talking in low voices. Some were laughing. Some were sitting alone, trying to understand that they had survived, and Daniel walked through them quietly, his mind still stuck in the memories of war, every step reminding him of the people he had lost, the battles he had fought, and the pain he had endured. He kept thinking about the reward ceremony, about the moment his name would be called, and he would finally feel that everything had a purpose. After some time, a loud voice echoed through the camp, calling soldiers one by one, and finally, Daniel heard his name. His heart started beating faster, and he moved forward with slow but steady steps. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. He stood in front of the commanders, expecting to hear words of honor, expecting to receive something valuable, but instead the commander looked at him with a strange expression, not proud, not happy, but cold and distant. Without saying much, the commander handed him a small device and a paper. Daniel looked down, confused, trying to understand what it was, and before he could ask anything, two guards brought someone forward, someone in chains, someone weak, someone not human. It was a young alien woman. Her skin had a soft silver glow. Her eyes were a deep blue that seemed almost alive, and her long hair moved slightly even though there was no wind. She looked tired, but not broken. Her body was weak, but her eyes were strong, watching everything carefully. Daniel stepped back in shock. This was not what he expected. Not even close. He looked at the commander again, thinking this must be some kind of mistake, but the commander simply said that this was his reward, a captured alien. Now his property, something valuable in the new world after the war. Daniel felt anger rising inside him. He did not fight a war to own someone. He did not risk his life for this. He opened his mouth to refuse, but before he could speak, the alien woman suddenly looked directly at him and spoke in a soft, calm voice, in perfect human language, telling him quietly that refusing her would be a bigger mistake than accepting her. Daniel froze, his mind unable to understand how she could speak his language so clearly, and more importantly, why her words felt like a warning, not a request. Something about her tone made him uneasy, as if she knew something he did not. The commander became impatient and told Daniel to accept his reward and move on. The war was over, and this was the new order. Daniel looked around and saw other soldiers receiving similar rewards, alien prisoners, objects, strange technologies, and no one was questioning it, as if this had already become normal. Slowly, Daniel took the device from the commander, his hands heavy, his thoughts confused, and the moment he did, the chains on the alien woman unlocked automatically, falling to the ground with a soft metallic sound. She did not move. She simply stood there, looking at him, waiting. For a few seconds, everything felt still, like time had stopped, and Daniel realized something strange. He was not looking at a prisoner. He was looking at someone who did not seem afraid at all, someone who was watching him the same way he was watching her, trying to understand. As they walked away from the command area, Daniel could feel the weight of eyes on him. Other soldiers whispering, some jealous, some curious, because what he had received was clearly different, more rare, more important, and that made him uncomfortable. When they reached his shelter, Daniel stopped and looked at her again, trying to figure out what to do next. But before he could speak, she quietly said that everything he believed about the war was not true, and that this was not a reward, but the beginning of something much bigger and much more dangerous. Daniel felt a cold chill run through his body, her words echoing in his mind. And for the first time since the war ended, he felt fear again, not of battle, but of the unknown. And as he stood there, staring at the mysterious alien woman who was now somehow connected to his fate, he had no idea that this moment would change everything. And if you are enjoying this story so far, Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you do not miss what happens next, because what is coming will be far more dangerous than the war he just survived. Daniel stood inside his small shelter, the weak yellow light above flickering slowly, casting long shadows across the walls, and the alien woman remained near the entrance, silent, calm, watching everything as if she already understood this place better than he did. The air between them felt heavy, filled with questions that Daniel did not know how to ask, and answers he was not ready to hear. He finally took a slow breath and stepped closer, his voice low but firm as he asked her name. And after a brief pause, she replied softly, saying her name was Lyra, her voice smooth and steady, almost too steady for someone who had just been a prisoner. Daniel repeated the name in his mind, tried to connect it with everything he had seen during the war, but it meant nothing to him, and that made him even more uneasy. He looked down at the control device in his hand, the one that gave him power over her, and for a moment, he felt disgusted. Without saying anything, he placed the device on the table and stepped back. Then he gestured toward the chair, telling her she could sit if she wanted. Lyra did not move immediately. She studied him carefully, as if testing him, and then slowly, she walked forward and sat down, her movements quiet, controlled, almost graceful despite her weakness. Minutes passed in silence, the kind of silence that felt louder than war, and Daniel finally spoke again, asking her what she meant earlier about the war not being real, about something bigger coming. His voice carried doubt, but also curiosity, and deep inside, a growing fear. Lyra lifted her eyes and looked directly at him, and for a second, Daniel felt like she was looking through him. Not at him. She told him that humans believed they had won, but in truth, they had only survived the first layer of something much deeper, something hidden, something that had been watching both sides for a very long time, guiding the war slowly, carefully like a game. Daniel shook his head, trying to reject the idea, saying that he had fought on the front lines. He had seen the enemy. He had seen her people, but Lyra calmly replied that what he saw was only what he was allowed to see, her voice never rising, never showing panic, which made her words even more disturbing. Suddenly, the light above them flickered again, stronger this time, and a strange buzzing sound filled the room for a second before disappearing. Daniel looked up quickly, thinking it was just damaged wiring, but Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, as if she noticed something more. She told him quietly that the systems here were not stable, not because they were broken, but because something was interfering with them, something that did not belong to this world. Daniel felt a small wave of irritation, telling her that this was just a damaged camp after war, nothing more. But even as he said it, he was not fully convinced. To prove his point, he turned toward the communication panel and tried to activate it, but the screen flickered strangely, symbols appearing for a brief second that he did not recognize. Before returning to normal, Daniel froze, his hand still on the panel, his heart beating faster now. Lyra slowly stood up, her gaze fixed on the screen, and she whispered that it had already started. Daniel turned to her, confusion and tension growing inside him, asking what she meant, and she replied that whatever had been hiding during the war was now revealing itself, and it was closer than he thought. Before Daniel could respond, a loud noise echoed from outside, a scream, sudden and sharp, followed by chaos, voices shouting, footsteps running. Daniel grabbed his weapon instantly and rushed to the door, signaling Lyra to stay behind. But as he stepped outside, what he saw made him stop. A group of soldiers had surrounded one of their own, but something was wrong. The man in the center was moving strangely, his body stiff, his eyes completely empty, and then without warning, he attacked the others with unnatural speed, knocking them down like they were nothing. Daniel raised his weapon, his training taking over, but he hesitated for a second because this was not the enemy he knew. This was something else, something inside a human body, and before he could act, the man turned his head slowly and looked directly at him, his eyes dark, lifeless, and yet somehow aware. In that moment, Daniel felt it clearly. This was not over, not even close. Behind him, Lyra stepped closer and said in a calm but serious voice that this was only the beginning, and if he wanted to survive what was coming, he would have to stop thinking like a soldier and start understanding the truth. because the real enemy was not the one he'd been fighting all this time, but something far more dangerous, something that could not be seen until it was already too late. And as the night grew darker around the camp, Daniel realized that the reward he had accepted was not a gift, but a warning, and Lyra was not just a survivor of war. She was the key to something he did not yet understand, something that was now slowly pulling him into a new kind of battle, one where nothing was clear and no one could be trusted, not even his own people. The night did not calm after the attack. Instead, it became heavier, darker, as if the air itself had changed, and Daniel stood frozen for a moment, watching the chaos in front of him. The soldier who had just attacked his own unit was now surrounded, but no one moved closer. No one understood what they were facing, and that fear was something Daniel had never seen before, not even during the worst days of war. The infected soldier moved again, slow at first, then suddenly fast, his body twisting in unnatural ways, as if something inside him was learning how to control him. And when he spoke, his voice was broken, layered, like more than one presence was trying to speak at the same time. The words were unclear, but the feeling behind them was enough to send a chill through everyone standing there. Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon, his instincts screaming at him to act. But something held him back, something deeper than fear. It was the realization that this was not just another enemy to shoot and forget. This was something different, something that did not follow the rules he had known all his life. Behind him, Lyra stepped forward slowly, her presence calm in the middle of chaos. And without raising her voice, she said that they needed to leave immediately. But Daniel shook his head, refusing to run without understanding what was happening. He demanded answers, and this time, Lyra did not stay silent. She told him that what he was seeing was only a small sign of the real enemy, a species that does not fight directly, a species that hides, watches, and controls. She explained that during the war, both humans and her kind believed they were fighting each other. But in truth, they were both being used, pushed into conflict by something that feeds on destruction, something that grows stronger with every battle. Daniel tried to process her words, but they felt too big, too impossible. He had spent years believing in a clear enemy, a clear purpose, and now everything was breaking apart. He asked her why no one knew about this, why no one had seen it before. And Lyra answered that some had seen it, but they never lived long enough to tell the truth. Before Daniel could ask more, the situation in front of them escalated. The infected soldier suddenly stopped moving, his body going completely still, and for a second, it looked like everything was over, but then his head slowly turned again, and his eyes locked onto Daniel, not with anger, but with something far more terrifying, recognition. In that moment, Daniel felt it, a strange pressure in his mind, like something was trying to reach inside him, to understand him, to see what he was thinking. He stumbled back slightly, his vision blurring for a second, and Lyra quickly stepped between him and the soldier, her hand lifting slightly, and for the first time, a faint glow appeared around her, soft but powerful. The soldier reacted instantly, letting out a distorted sound, not quite a scream, not quite a voice, and then his body collapsed to the ground, lifeless, as if whatever was controlling him had suddenly left. The silence that followed was even worse than the chaos before, because now everyone knew that something invisible had been there, and it was now gone, or maybe just hiding again. The other soldiers looked confused, scared, whispering among themselves, trying to explain what they had just seen, but no one had answers, and Daniel knew that if he stayed here, the truth would never be revealed, only buried under orders and fear. He turned to Lyra, his expression serious now. No more denial, no more doubt. And he told her to explain everything fully, clearly, no secrets, because if what she said was true, then the war he had survived was nothing compared to what was coming next. Lyra nodded slowly, understanding that this was the moment where trust would either begin or end. And she told him that the enemy was known among her people as the Silent Ones, not because they made no sound, but because they erased the voices of others. They do not conquer planets with armies. They take control from within, turning allies into enemies, creating wars that weaken entire civilizations before they finally take everything. Daniel listened carefully, every word pulling him deeper into a reality he never imagined. And he asked the question that now mattered most. Why him? Why was he involved in this? Why did she warn him specifically? Lyra hesitated for the first time, her eyes lowering slightly. And then she revealed something that made Daniel's heart stop for a second. She told him that the moment the infected soldier looked at him, it was not random, it recognized him, because Daniel was already connected to them in some way, even if he did not know it yet. Daniel stepped back, his mind racing, rejecting the idea, but deep inside, something felt wrong, something he could not explain, memories that did not fully make sense, moments during the war where things felt off. Lyra stepped closer and said that this was why they had to leave immediately, because now that the Silent Ones had noticed him, they would not stop. They would follow, watch, and wait for the perfect moment to take control, just like they had done with countless others. The camp, which once felt like safety, now felt like a trap. Every soldier, every shadow, every quiet corner could be hiding something, and Daniel realized that staying here was no longer an option. Without another word, he made his decision. He turned away from the camp, away from the life he had known, and signaled Lyra to follow him, because whatever this hidden enemy was, he was now part of it, whether he wanted it or not. And as they disappeared into the darkness beyond the camp, leaving behind the only world Daniel had ever trusted, he knew one thing for certain. The real war had just begun, and this time, the enemy was not something he could see, but something that was already watching him, waiting, learning, and getting closer with every step he took. Daniel did not look back as he left the camp, his steps fast but controlled, his mind filled with questions that refused to stay quiet. The night around them was cold and silent, but not peaceful. Every sound felt sharper, every shadow felt alive, and Lyra followed closely behind him, her movements quiet, almost blending into the darkness, as if she had done this many times before. They moved through the outer edge of the camp, avoiding patrols, staying low, using the broken structures and abandoned vehicles as cover. Daniel's training guided him. But something felt different now. He was no longer escaping an enemy he understood. He was running from something he could not see, something that might already be near, watching every move. After some distance, they reached the edge of a ruined city, buildings torn apart, streets empty, the remains of war still fresh, and Daniel finally slowed down, taking a moment to breathe. But even here, far from the camp, the same heavy feeling remained, like the world itself was no longer safe. He turned to Lyra, his voice low but serious, asking her how far this Silent One's influence could reach, and Lyra replied that distance did not matter to them. They did not move like normal beings. They spread through minds, through signals, through anything that could carry thought, and once they noticed someone, they never truly lost track. Daniel felt tension rise inside him, realizing that running might not be enough. But before he could say anything, a distant sound echoed through the empty streets. A low mechanical hum mixed with something unnatural. Not quite a machine. Not quite alive. Both of them froze instantly, their senses sharp. Lyra stepped closer to him and whispered that they were already being followed, her voice calm. But there was urgency behind it now, something Daniel had not heard before, and that alone was enough to make him understand how serious this had become. They quickly moved deeper into the ruins, taking narrow paths between broken buildings, climbing over debris, staying out of open areas. But the sound did not fade. It grew closer, slower than a normal pursuit, but steady, patient, as if whatever was following them knew there was no need to rush. Daniel stopped suddenly and pulled Lyra into a half-collapsed structure, signaling her to stay quiet. They hid behind a broken wall, barely breathing, and after a few seconds, something passed by outside, something tall, unnatural, its movement smooth but wrong, like a body being controlled from a distance, its eyes glowing faintly, scanning the area, searching. Daniel felt his heart pounding, his grip tightening on his weapon. But Lyra gently placed her hand on his arm, stopping him from acting, her touch calm but firm. And for some reason, he listened, even though every instinct told him to fight. The creature paused for a moment, its head turning slightly, as if it sensed something, and then it continued moving, disappearing into the darkness beyond, leaving behind a silence that felt even heavier than before. Only after several long seconds did Daniel finally breathe again, and he looked at Lyra with a new understanding. This was real. Everything she said was real, and they were now being hunted by something far beyond anything he had faced before. They remained hidden for a while longer before moving again, slower now, more careful. And as they walked, the distance between them felt smaller, not just physically, but something else had changed. Trust, something that had not existed before, was beginning to form. After hours of moving through the ruins, they found temporary shelter in an old underground station, the entrance partially buried, hidden enough to give them some safety. Daniel checked the area carefully before allowing himself to relax slightly, and for the first time since leaving the camp, he lowered his weapon. Inside, the air was still and quiet, and they sat across from each other, the tension slowly fading, replaced by exhaustion. Daniel looked at Lyra again, but this time his gaze was different, no longer filled with suspicion, but with questions he genuinely wanted answers to. He asked her why she trusted him, why she warned him instead of escaping when she had the chance, and Lyra remained silent for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal before she finally spoke, telling him that he was not like the others, that even during the war, there were moments where he made choices that did not follow orders blindly, choices that showed something rare, something she believed could change the outcome of what was coming. Daniel did not know how to respond to that. He had never seen himself that way. He was just a soldier doing his duty, or at least that was what he believed, but now everything fell uncertain, including who he really was. As the silence returned, Lyra looked at him again, her expression softer now. But there was still something she was hiding, something she had not told him yet, and Daniel could feel it, but he did not push, not yet, because for now, survival was more important than answers, and both of them knew that whatever was chasing them had not given up. It was still out there, waiting, watching, learning, and as Daniel leaned back against the cold wall of the underground station, his eyes slowly closing for a brief moment of rest, he realized something he never expected. He was no longer just protecting himself. He was protecting her too, and somehow, in the middle of all this fear and uncertainty, that responsibility gave him a new kind of strength. But deep in the darkness beyond their hiding place, unseen and silent, something continued to move, something patient, something aware, and it was getting closer, one step at a time, waiting for the moment when running would no longer be enough. The underground station remained quiet, but it was not the kind of silence that brought peace. It was the kind that made every small sound feel dangerous, every breath feel too loud, and Daniel sat against the cold wall, his eyes half open, his body resting, but his mind still awake, unable to fully relax, while across from him, Lyra watched him carefully, as if she was waiting for the right moment to say something she had been holding back, something important. After a long pause, Lyra finally spoke, her voice softer than before, but carrying a weight that made Daniel slowly sit up. She told him that there was something he needed to know, something she had not told him earlier because she was not sure if he was ready to hear it, and the way she said it made Daniel feel a strange tension in his chest, like he already knew that whatever she was about to say would change everything again. Daniel nodded slowly, telling her to just say it, no more secrets, no more waiting, and Lyra looked at him for a moment before continuing. She explained that during the war, humans were not only fighting, they were also experimenting, trying to find ways to gain advantage, to control alien technology, to understand things they did not fully understand. And in those experiments, some soldiers were used without even knowing it. Daniel's expression tightened slightly, confusion mixing with concern, and he asked her what that had to do with him, and Lyra answered in a calm but direct way, telling him that he was one of those soldiers. For a second, the words did not fully reach him, as if his mind refused to accept them. But then memories began to surface, small, broken pieces, moments he had ignored before, times when he lost consciousness for no clear reason, times when he woke up feeling different, stronger, faster, but also disconnected. Lyra continued, telling him that whatever was done to him was not just physical, Something had been placed inside him, something that could not be seen, a signal, a marker, something that the Silent Ones could recognize, track, and eventually use. And that was why the infected soldier reacted to him earlier. It was not random, it was recognition. Daniel stood up quickly, pacing back and forth, his thoughts racing, trying to reject the idea, trying to find a reason why this could not be true. But the more he thought about it, the more things started to make sense in a way he did not want them to. He stopped and looked at Lyra, his voice sharper now, asking her how she knew all this. And Lyra did not hesitate this time. She told him that her people had studied the Silent Ones for a very long time, longer than humans had even known they existed, and they had learned how the Silent Ones marked their targets, how they prepared individuals to be used later, either as tools or as entry points. Daniel felt a cold wave pass through him. Realizing what that meant, he was not just being hunted, he was part of the reason they were being followed. He was the signal, the connection, the weakness. For a moment, silence filled the space again, heavier than before, and Daniel's thoughts turned darker, questioning himself, his choices, his entire purpose, wondering if he had ever truly been in control, or if everything had been leading to this moment. Lyra stepped closer, her voice steady but softer now, telling him that this did not mean he had lost. It meant he had a chance, because if the Silent Ones could track him, then they could also be traced through him. And that was something her people had never been able to do before. Daniel looked at her, confusion and anger still present, but now mixed with something else, a small spark of understanding. He asked her if she was saying that he could be used to find them, and Lyra nodded, telling him that he was both the problem and the key, the danger and the solution. Before Daniel could respond, the lights in the underground station suddenly flickered violently, stronger than before, and a low hum filled the air again. Louder this time, closer, and both of them froze instantly, their attention snapping toward the entrance. Lyra's expression changed, becoming more serious than ever, and she whispered that they had stayed too long. The signal inside him was active, stronger now, and it was guiding something directly to them. Daniel felt it then, not just fear, but something physical, a strange pressure inside his head, like a distant echo trying to reach him, calling him, pulling him, and for a brief second his vision blurred, images flashing his mind that were not his own, dark shapes, endless space, something vast and watching. He stumbled slightly, grabbing onto the wall, and Lyra quickly moved to support him, telling him to focus, to resist, because this was how they begin, slowly, quietly, taking control piece by piece. The sound from the entrance grew louder, no longer distant. Something was coming, something drawn directly to him, and Daniel realized that running would not be enough anymore. Hiding would not save them, because as long as the signal was inside him, they would always find him. He looked at Lyra again, his expression changing, the confusion slowly turning into determination, and he told her that if he was the reason they were being tracked, then they needed to stop running and start thinking differently, because if the enemy was using him, then maybe he could use that connection against them. Lyra held his gaze for a moment, seeing the change in him. And for the first time, there was a small sense of hope in her eyes, but also fear, because what he was suggesting was dangerous, more dangerous than anything they had faced so far. The sound at the entrance suddenly stopped, replaced by complete silence, the kind of silence that comes right before something happens. And both of them knew that whatever was out there was no longer searching. It had found them. And as Daniel stood there, no longer just a soldier, no longer just a survivor, but something far more important and far more dangerous, he understood one thing clearly. The truth about him was not just a curse. It was the beginning of a new kind of war, one that would decide not just his fate, but the fate of everything. The silence at the entrance did not last long. It broke in a way that felt unnatural, like reality itself was being pulled apart, and Daniel stood still, his body tense, his mind focused, no longer reacting with confusion, but with a growing sense of purpose, while Lyra remained beside him, her presence calm, but her eyes sharp, watching the darkness ahead as if she could already see what was coming. A slow, distorted movement appeared at the edge of the underground entrance. Not one figure, but several, shapes forming and shifting as they stepped forward, their bodies not fully stable like shadows trying to become solid. And as they moved closer, Daniel could see that they were once human, soldiers from the camp. But now something else controlled them, something deeper, something hidden beneath their skin. Daniel raised his weapon. But this time he did not hesitate. His fear had changed into something stronger, something clearer. He fired, the sound echoing through the station. One of the figures dropped, but the others did not stop. They continued moving forward, slow but certain, like they already knew how this would end. Lyra stepped forward then, her hand lifting slightly, and the faint glow around her returned. But this time it was stronger, brighter, spreading around her like a shield. And when the controlled soldiers came closer, they suddenly reacted, their movements becoming unstable, as if her presence was interfering with whatever controlled them. She told Daniel to focus, not just on fighting, but on what he felt inside, the signal, the connection, because this was no longer just a physical battle. It was something deeper, something that existed beyond what he could see. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief moment, even as the danger approached, and he focused on the strange feeling inside his mind, the pressure, the pull, and instead of resisting it completely, he allowed himself to follow it just enough to understand it. And suddenly, everything changed. For a second, he was no longer in the underground station. He was somewhere else, somewhere vast and dark, filled with endless movement, shapes that had no clear form, something massive watching from all directions at once, something aware of him, something that had always been there, waiting. He opened his eyes again quickly, breathing heavier now, but different, more aware, and he realized something important. The connection was not one way. They could sense him, but he could also sense them. And that changed everything. "Lyra," he said quickly, his voice steady despite everything. "I can feel them." And Lyra looked at him with both surprise and urgency, telling him to hold on to that feeling, to use it because this was their only chance to fight back properly. The controlled soldiers moved closer again, but this time, Daniel did not just see them as enemies. He saw the movement behind them, the invisible threads controlling them, faint, almost impossible to notice, but now that he had felt the connection, he could see it. Without wasting time, he changed his aim, not at the bodies, but at the movement, firing in a way that broke the control instead of just destroying the host. And one by one, the figures began to collapse, not dead, but freed, their bodies falling as the control was broken. Lyra watched him closely, understanding what he had done, and she told him that he was learning faster than expected. But there was no time to stop, because this was only the beginning, not the real fight. The ground beneath them suddenly trembled slightly, and the walls of the underground station began to crack. Small pieces falling, dust filling the air, and Daniel felt the connection grow stronger. Heavier, like something much bigger, was now focusing directly on him. Lyra's expression changed again, more serious than before, and she told him that they had drawn its attention fully now. The source, the mind behind everything. It was no longer watching from a distance. It was reaching toward them directly. The air around them distorted, like heat waves, but colder, unnatural, and slowly, a presence began to form in front of them. Not a body, not a creature, but something else, something that did not need a physical shape to exist. Daniel felt it pressing against his mind again, stronger this time, trying to understand him, trying to break him. And for a moment, he almost lost focus, the images returning, louder, clearer, trying to pull him in completely. But this time he did not step back. He stood firm, his eyes locked forward, his mind holding its ground. And he realized that this was the real battle. Not weapons, not strength, but control, will identity. Lyra moved beside him, her glow now fully visible, surrounding both of them, protecting him just enough to keep him stable, but not enough to block the connection completely, because now they needed it. Daniel took a slow breath, and instead of resisting the presence, he pushed back, focusing everything he had into the connection, sending his awareness directly toward the source. And for the first time, the presence reacted, not with control, but with resistance. A low, deep vibration filled the space, not a sound, but a feeling, and Daniel understood that this was not just an enemy. This was something ancient, something that had done this countless times before. And yet, it was not expecting resistance like this. The station continued to shake, reality itself feeling unstable around them. And Lyra told him that if they were going to stop this, they had to go further, to follow the connection all the way to its origin, to face it directly. Daniel nodded slowly, his fear now replaced by determination, and he understood what that meant. There would be no more running after this, no more hiding. This would be the end, one way or another. And as the presence in front of them grew stronger, more focused, preparing to either take control or destroy them completely, Daniel took a step forward instead of back, choosing to face it directly, because the final battle was no longer coming. It had already begun, and this time, he was ready to fight not just for survival, but for something far greater than himself. The pressure in the underground station became unbearable, as if the space itself was collapsing under the weight of the unseen presence. And Daniel stood at the center of it, his breathing slow but controlled, his mind no longer running from the connection, but holding onto it with purpose, while Lyra remained beside him, her glow now brighter than ever. Yet even that light seemed small compared to the vast darkness pressing in from all sides. The presence in front of them did not take a clear form, but it was no longer distant. It was here, aware, focused entirely on Daniel, studying him, testing him, and for a brief moment, everything around them faded, the broken walls, the dust, the ground beneath their feet. All of it felt less real than the connection inside his mind. Images flooded Daniel's thoughts again, but this time they were clearer, worlds burning, civilizations falling, endless wars repeating again and again, and behind all of it, the same silent force, watching, guiding, feeding, growing stronger with every conflict. And in that moment, Daniel understood the truth completely. This was not just an enemy. It was a cycle, a system that survived by turning others against each other. Lyra's voice reached him through the noise, steady but urgent, telling him that this was the source, the core of the Silent Ones. Not a single being, but a connected intelligence spread across space. And the only way to stop it was to break the connection at its origin. Daniel's mind raced, trying to understand how that was even possible. And then he felt it again, the signal inside him, stronger than ever, no longer just a mark, but a bridge, something that could connect directly to the source if he allowed it fully. He looked at Lyra, his expression calm now, clearer than it had ever been, and he asked her quietly what would happen if he used the signal completely. And Lyra froze for a second, her eyes widening slightly, because she already knew the answer. She told him the truth, that if he opened the connection fully, it would lead directly to the core, but it would also mean he would not survive it. His mind, his body, everything would be consumed in the process. For a moment, silence returned between them. But this time it was different, not filled with fear, but with understanding, and Daniel looked down briefly, thinking about everything he had been through, the war, the lies, the pain, and then he looked back at Lyra. He told her that he had spent his whole life following orders, fighting battles he did not fully understand. But this time, this choice was his, and if ending this meant saving countless lives, stopping endless wars before they even began, then it was worth it. Lyra stepped closer, her voice no longer calm, but filled with emotion, telling him there had to be another way, that he did not have to do this. But Daniel gently shook his head because deep down, both of them knew there was no other way. The presence around them began to react more aggressively now, sensing what Daniel was about to do. The pressure increasing, the connection pulling harder, trying to take control before he could act. But Daniel did not resist anymore. Instead, he did the opposite. He stepped forward mentally, opening the connection completely, allowing the signal inside him to expand, to reach outward, to connect directly with the source. The moment he did, everything changed. The underground station disappeared from his awareness, replaced by an endless space of shifting forms and energy, the core of the Silent Ones revealing itself fully, vast, complex, powerful beyond anything he had imagined. But now he was inside it, not as a victim, but as a force, and for the first time, the Silent Ones reacted with something new, something close to uncertainty. Daniel focused everything he had into one thought, one purpose, not fear, not anger, but a clear decision to end it, to break the cycle, to stop the system that fed on suffering. And as that intention spread through the connection, it began to disrupt the structure of the Silent Ones from within. Outside, in the real world, Lyra watched as the energy around Daniel intensified, his body surrounded by a growing light, unstable but powerful, and she reached out, wanting to stop him, but she knew she could not. The entire station began to shake violently, cracks spreading everywhere, the air filled with a deep vibration, and then, in a single moment, everything burst into light. A wave of energy spread outward, not destructive, but cleansing, moving far beyond the station, beyond the planet, reaching into the vast space where the Silent Ones existed. And one by one, the connections began to break, the control fading, the cycle collapsing. And then, silence, true silence, not heavy, not threatening, but peaceful. Lyra slowly opened her eyes, the glow around her fading, and she found herself alone in the ruins of the station. The presence gone, the pressure gone, everything gone. She looked around, her heart heavy but calm, and she understood what had happened. Daniel had done it. He had ended something that had existed for far too long. Days later, the world began to change. Reports came in of soldiers returning to normal, of conflicts suddenly stopping, of systems stabilizing, and slowly, both humans and the remaining alien survivors realized that something unseen had disappeared, something that had been influencing everything. Lyra stood under an open sky, looking up at the stars, the same stars that once felt distant and cold, but now felt different, quieter, freer. She thought about Daniel, about the human who refused to see her as a slave, who chose to trust her, who chose to fight for something greater than himself. And in the end, she realized something important. The war had ended long ago, but the real victory came later, through a choice no one expected. And the reward Daniel received was not what he wanted, but it became something far greater than anything he could have imagined. Because in the end, he did not just survive the war, he became the reason it would never happen again.